Days before my birthday, I knew my sister would make something up to make my parents cancel the event. It had become a pattern I couldn't ignore anymore, so when they left for her again, I left for good. 9 years later, my mother called at 4:47 p.m. on the day of my 25th birthday dinner, 7 hours before the reservation, 8 seats I'd spent 3 weeks filling, friends, a coworker I actually liked, 2 people I'd met through the barn where I kept my horse on weekday mornings, a $100 deposit already paid to a restaurant I'd chosen because it had a private room in the back, and I had wanted for once to feel like the evening was mine. She didn't open with an apology. She opened with an explanation, which is a different thing entirely. Sloan announced her engagement last night, she said. She wants to do a dinner, tonight. She needs the family there, Kinsley. You understand. I was standing in my apartment in the dress I'd bought for the occasion. Forest green, bought on sale, the kind of thing you buy when you've decided to participate in your own life. My reservation is at 7, I said. I know, sweetheart, but you're the strong one. Sloan needs us right now. I said okay. I called the restaurant. I explained. They kept the deposit. Of course they did. 7 hours notice. And I said that was fine, and thanked them and hung up and stood in my kitchen in the forest green dress for about 4 minutes. Then I took the dress off, put on jeans, and packed a duffel bag. I didn't know where I was going. I knew I was going somewhere east of the city, which was the direction that felt least like the life I was leaving. I drove for 3 hours without a particular destination, which is either a crisis or a liberation depending on the year you're in. And somewhere around the 2-hour mark I remembered something my father had mentioned once, probably in passing, probably in the forgettable way he mentioned most things that weren't about my sister. His father Earl had land out east, 80 acres. Nobody working them, Earl getting old. I had my grandfather's phone number in my phone from a Christmas card I'd never sent. I called him from a gas station parking lot at 9:30 at night. He picked up on the 3rd ring. I told him where I was. I told him what had happened, briefly, the way you tell someone a story when you're not sure yet whether it matters. I told him I needed somewhere to go. He was quiet for a moment, then he said, "You know where I am." That was it. No questions, no conditions. Just a location I could find on a map and a man who had answered the phone. I drove the rest of the way in the dark. My name is Kinsley Sinclair. I'm 34 years old. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, the older of 2 daughters in a family where the emotional labor was distributed the way physical labor is distributed in families with 1 strong child and 1 fragile one. Whoever could carry the weight did, because whoever couldn't carry it needed to be protected from it. My sister Sloan is 2 years younger than me and has been, for as long as I can remember, the family's primary project. This is not because she is cruel or calculating in the obvious way. She's not. She is genuinely, frequently, in need. She has a talent for crisis that I think even she doesn't fully understand as a talent, a specific ability to generate situations that require immediate family response, and our parents, Linda and Dave Sinclair, have spent 30 years responding to them with the dedicated urgency of a volunteer fire department. I was the one who didn't need response. I was self-sufficient, independent, emotionally regulated. I handled things. I was, in my mother's specific vocabulary, the strong one, which I understood from about age 12 meant the one we don't have to worry about, which meant the one we don't have to show up for. I had spent my entire life being proud of my own competence without understanding that my family had specifically constructed a dynamic in which my competence would always be used as the reason to not show up for me. The birthday dinner was not the first time. It was just the time I stopped. My grandfather Earl Sinclair was 71 years old when I arrived at his property at 11:30 on a Thursday night. He was sitting on his front porch in a wooden chair with a cup of something warm, in the dark, as if he'd known I was coming and had decided waiting outside was the appropriate response to the occasion. The land was 80 acres of what I could see in the headlights as I pulled down the gravel drive. Flat, dry, the kind of tired that land gets when it hasn't been worked properly in years. A sagging fence line along the east pasture. A barn that had a functional roof and not much else going for it. A farmhouse that was solid but needed paint in the way old farmhouses need paint. Not desperately, but inevitably. Earl stood up when I got out of the car. He was a tall man, thinned by age but not diminished by it, with the specific physical quality of someone who has worked outside for 60 years and has the posture to prove it. He looked at me for a moment in the porch light. This granddaughter he'd seen at holidays and Christmas gatherings and never more than that, and he did not say anything sentimental. He turned and went inside. I followed. He had the guest room made up. In the morning, he handed me a pair of cracked leather gloves and pointed at the east fence. "These were my father's," he said. "They'll fit when you've earned them." I put them on. They were 2 sizes too large. I went to work on the fence. I bled through them by noon. The first year was the physical education of my life. I had grown up with horses in the peripheral way of someone who kept one at a boarding stable and visited on weekends, who understood the theory of the work without having done the work at full scale. Earl's operation was different, or had been different before age and circumstance had let it run down. 80 acres with potential for 40 head, 2 working pastures, a hay operation that had been profitable in the 90s and could be again. Earl didn't instruct me so much as work beside me and let the land teach what it had to teach. He was not a romantic about any of it. When I got something wrong, when I wired a fence section with the wrong tension and it sagged within a week, when I misjudged a foal's weight and called the vet for something that resolved on its own, he told me plainly and without softening what the correct approach was. When I got something right, he said nothing, which I came came to understand was the higher form of acknowledgement. I slept in the guest room for 4 months and then moved to the small apartment above the barn when I'd finished insulating it, because I wanted the separation, the sense that I had earned my own space on the property rather than occupying his. Earl thought this was mildly eccentric but didn't object. I did not go back to Columbus. My mother called twice in the first 3 months. Both calls were about Sloan, one about a relationship that had ended badly, one about a job situation that had become complicated. At the end of the second call, almost as a postscript, she said, "How are you doing out there?" "Fine," I said. "Working." "That's good," she said. "You were always good at that." And that was that. My father emailed once, 3 lines, asking if I was all right and mentioning that the drive out was long if I ever wanted to come back for a weekend. I replied that I was all right. He did not write again. Sloan sent a text 8 months in that said, "Mom says you're living on a farm LOL. Is that like a phase?" I didn't reply. By the end of year 1, the east fence was solid. The barn had new interior lighting and a repaired stall system, and Earl and I had 8 horses in active board, which was 3 more than the property had seen in a decade. By the end of year 2, we had 19. I had hired one part-time hand, a man named Tom Garrett, 43 years old, who had worked ranches in 3 states and had come to us through a word-of-mouth recommendation from a veterinarian named Dr. Claire Aldis, who handled our equine care and had over 2 years become something close to a friend. Earl watched all of it with the quiet satisfaction of a man who had always believed the land was capable of something and had simply been waiting for someone to prove it. He did not tell me during this period that he had already been to the county office. My cousin Maddie lived in Dayton and kept a loose foot in both worlds, my family's world in Columbus and the peripheral world of Earl's land, which she visited occasionally out of genuine affection for him rather than any interest in the property. She is, of all my family members, the one I trust most completely, which is a low bar and also a true thing. In the spring of my 3rd year on the ranch, she forwarded me a screenshot. She sent it with no message attached, which told me she was uncertain how to frame it and had decided that presenting it without commentary was more honest than trying to soften it. The screenshot was from a group chat, a family group chat I had not been added to. I scrolled through it. My mother. "When Dad passes, the land's worth real money now that someone fixed it up. We split it 3 ways and sell. Kinsley can keep a horse or 2 if she's reasonable about it. My sister Sloan, a heart emoji. My father, sounds fair." I read those 2 words a dozen times. Sounds fair. My father, who had emailed me once in 3 years and not written back, who had watched me leave without following, who had spent a lifetime treating my competence as a resource that didn't require tending. He had read a message about dividing the value of the land I had spent 3 years rebuilding, land that had been worth a fraction of what it was worth now specifically because I had bled for it, and his response was 2 words. Sounds fair. I put my phone down on the kitchen table in the barn apartment and looked at the wall for a while. The wall I had insulated myself. Above the barn I had rewired. On the property I had rebuilt from 80 sagging acres into something that people drove from 2 counties over to board their horses at. Then I picked the phone back up and walked to the farmhouse. Earl was at the kitchen table with his coffee. He read the screenshot slow, the way he reads everything, fully, without rushing to the end. When he finished, he set the phone down and looked out the window at the south pasture, at the new fence line, at the 2 mares moving along it in the morning light. "One day this place should be yours," he said. "You're the only one who ever bled for it." I said something about sentiment. I said he'd be around for a long time yet. I didn't ask him what he meant. I should have asked him what he meant. Earl's health declined in his 75th year, which the doctors, specifically Dr. Raymond Cho, Earl's primary care physician of 11 years, who had the careful, measured manner of someone who tells the truth and wants the person hearing it to have time to process it, had been anticipating and had warned us to expect. His heart was working harder than it should. His energy was less. He still came to the barn every morning and still knew the name and history of every horse on the property, but the mornings got shorter. My mother drove out in April of that year, the first time she'd visited in 7 years. She arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in a clean sedan with a roller bag, dressed in the careful, casual way she dresses when she wants to appear comfortable in contexts that don't come naturally to her. She stood in the gravel drive and looked at the barn, the new barn, the one I'd built in year 4 with Tom's help and a contractor named Jesse Briggs who had done the structural work, and I watched her face do something I recognized. Recalculation. She was updating the number. She walked the property with Earl that afternoon, the 2 of them moving slowly because Earl moved slowly now, and I did not join them because I understood that the conversation they were having was not one I was invited to. I watched from the barn. I could not hear what was said. I could see Earl's posture, unchanged, unhurried, the posture of a man who has decided something and is not going to be moved from it. Later, my mother found me at the fence. "He looks good," she said, "considering he's doing all right." She asked about the operation, about what the property had been generating, about the arena I'd built in year 3, which was where we ran the training program. Quick pause. If you want more stories like this in better quality, my Spotify's linked in the description. She asked each question with the manner of someone conducting a casual conversation, and each question was pointed in the specific direction of a financial assessment. I answered factually and briefly. She changed tack, started asking Earl when she found him later in the evening about his paperwork, about his will, about whether everything was in order, about making sure he did right by all his grandchildren. Plural, she said, with a specific emphasis that I heard from the kitchen kitchen doorway. Earl redirected every question. Ask Kinsley. 2 words. Every time. She asked about updating the will. Ask Kinsley. She asked about the land transfer process. Ask Kinsley. She asked if he'd spoken to an attorney recently. Ask Kinsley. She was at the kitchen table by the time she understood that the redirection was not a symptom of cognitive decline. It was a choice. It was Earl telling her, in the specific economical vocabulary of a man who said what he meant and meant what he said, that the relevant authority on the subject of this property was not her. She left the next morning. She did not ask me anything. Earl died in September, which was not a surprise and was also unbearable in the way all deaths are unbearable regardless of preparation. He had asked to be buried on the property, on the south hill, where the land rose slightly, and you could see both pastures from the top, and we did that. A small service attended by neighbors, boarders, Dr. Aldous, Tom, Jesse Briggs, and Harlan Webb. Harlan Webb was Earl's attorney. He had been handling Earl's legal affairs for 22 years. He was a quiet man in his 60s who wore the same style of collared shirt every time I had ever seen him, which was several times over the previous 3 years because Earl and I had both been to his office in town for various property matters. He attended the funeral as a friend as much as a professional, which is the kind of thing that happens in small enough communities. My family came to the funeral. My mother, my father Dave, Sloan, who arrived in an outfit I can only describe as funeral appropriate but notable, and immediately began accepting condolences from people who'd known Earl for 40 years as if she were a primary figure in his life, which she was not. She had visited the property exactly twice in the 9 years I'd lived here. My mother found me at the coffee urn after the graveside service. She was wearing the charcoal coat, the good one. She had the expression of a woman who has attended a funeral and is already mentally in the meeting that comes after. We should sit down soon, she said, about the land. We'll settle everything fairly, as a family. You're right, I said. Come out Saturday. Bring whoever you need. She smiled. The social smile, the one that means she's gotten what she wanted without fully understanding yet what she's gotten. Wonderful. I'll bring the realtor. Of course she would. I spent the week between the funeral and Saturday building a room where the truth couldn't be twisted. This required logistics and some specific phone calls. The first call was to Harlan Webb. I told him what I anticipated would happen on Saturday and asked if he would attend, not as the estate attorney, because there was no estate in the relevant sense as he and I both knew, but as a guest, a friend of Earl's at a memorial lunch on the property. He understood immediately. He said he would be there at noon. The second call was to Tom Garrett, who I told would need to be present, and who I trusted completely because he had worked this land for 6 years and had watched me build it and had no relationship with my family whatsoever, except a handshake at Earl's funeral. The third call was to 7 of the neighboring families and 3 of our regular boarders, people who had known Earl, people who had watched what this property had become, people whose presence would constitute a community record of what happened that afternoon. I told them it was a memorial lunch, which it genuinely was. I made food. I set up tables on the south porch. Tom strung lights. It looked like what it was, a gathering in honor of a man who had loved this land and the people who worked it. My mother arrived at 12:14 p.m. Her heels were wrong for gravel, which I noticed immediately and said nothing about. Beside her was Paula Nettleton. I looked her up later. 16 years in real estate, primarily agricultural properties, based in the county seat, with a leather folio under her arm and the professional expression of someone who has come to do a transaction and expects the transaction to be uncomplicated. Sloan trailed behind them, already scanning the crowd with the specific attention of someone looking for sympathy sources. My father had not come, which I noted and did not remark on. They moved through the crowd accepting condolences. My mother was gracious in the social way, warm with people she'd never met, performing the grief of a family that had been close to Earl in a way that required no specific memory of him. 10 minutes in, she clinked a fork against a glass on my porch. The crowd settled. Our family has decided to honor Earl by selling this ranch to good people who will continue his legacy. Paula here will be handling the process. She put her hand on Paula's shoulder with the confident ease of someone who has already completed the preliminary work. And please don't worry about Kinsley. She'll be well taken care of. She said it in the warm, benevolent tone of a woman announcing a gift. I looked at Harlan, who was standing near the back of the crowd with a coffee cup and his folder, and the mild, unreadable expression of a man who is waiting for his cue. My mother turned to me. "Isn't that right, sweetheart?" I set down my coffee. "Actually, Mom, the ranch isn't yours to sell." She laughed the social laugh, the one that means isn't that a charming misunderstanding. "Honey, we'll handle the details privately. We can handle them right now." Harlan stepped forward from the back of the crowd. My mother looked at him for the first time. This quiet man she'd passed all morning, exchanged pleasantries with, ignored as a guest at a lunch she'd just commandeered. He opened his folder, held up one page. County seal, red stamp, clean official paper with Earl's signature at the bottom and mine beside it, and a notary stamp and a filing date from 3 years ago. Earl Sinclair transferred full ownership of this property to Kinsley Sinclair 3 years ago by warranty deed, Harlan said. His voice was level and clear and carried to everyone on that porch. The transfer was recorded with the county. It has been her property, free and clear, since the date of recording. There is no estate interest in this land. There is nothing to sell and nothing to split. Paula Nettleton closed her leather folio. The sound of it, small, decisive, the click of something that has concluded, was the loudest thing on that porch. My mother's face did something I had never seen it do. The performance fell off it, not gradually, peacefully. All at once, the warmth and the benevolence and the gracious widow of the family patriarch presentation gone. What was underneath was smaller and rawer and genuinely shocked. He was confused, she said. Her voice had a new texture. He was sick. You manipulated a dying old man into... He drove to the county office himself, Harlan said. 3 years ago. He was in full health and of complete sound mind. I documented his capacity at the time of transfer. He was sharper than most men half his age. She isolated him. She kept him out here away from his family. Earl Sinclair made his own choices about his property and his relationships for 75 years. Harlan's voice remained level. This transfer was one of them. The crowd was very still. I looked at my mother. I thought about the strong one. I thought about the deposit I'd eaten on my 25th birthday. I thought about every family gathering where I'd been the one who handled logistics and kept things moving and asked nothing in return, because the asking would have been inconvenient, because needing things was Sloane's territory, and I had been assigned somewhere else on the map. I thought about Earl in the county office 3 years ago, driving himself, sitting across from a clerk with a deed transfer form, putting my name on paper before his health slipped, because he had watched what happened to this land when I arrived, and he had made a decision, and he had not told me because he knew I would argue, and he did not want an argument. He had wanted it done. You taught me I was the strong one, I said, so you'd never have to be soft. I kept my voice quiet. The crowd leaned in slightly the way people lean when something true is being said at a volume that requires attention. Grandpa showed up for me on paper, permanently. I picked up my coffee. The gate's this way. I walked them to it myself. Past the barn, the new barn, with the name painted above the door in the lettering Earl had helped me choose. Past the full stalls, each one holding a horse whose board paid the operations overhead, and then some. Past the arena, the training ring, the south fence line that I had wired myself on a Tuesday morning 9 years ago with a pair of gloves 2 sizes too large and a broken fence that didn't care about any of it. Paula pulled out of the drive first. She gave me an apologetic nod as she passed, which I accepted because she was a professional who had come to do a job and had found that the job didn't exist. Then my mother's sedan, Sloane in the back seat, already on her phone. My mother in the front, looking straight ahead, not at me as they passed. I stood at the gate. The car shrank down the gravel drive and turned onto the county road and disappeared. I slid the bolt home. A year later, Tom Garrett runs the day-to-day with an efficiency that continues to impress me. We brought in 2 new staff in the spring, both referred by Dr. Aldis, who has become a reliable source of exactly the kind of people who know what they're doing and don't need to be managed. The training program has a wait list. Jesse Briggs finished the second arena in August. It is better than the first. My mother has emailed 3 times. The emails are carefully written, the kind of careful that happens when someone has consulted someone else about how to begin repairing a relationship and is following the advice. The word fair appears in 2 of them, which I find clarifying. My father called once. We spoke for 11 minutes. He said he hadn't fully understood what I'd built out here. I said I knew. He said he hoped we could find a way forward. I said maybe. He said that seemed reasonable. I said yes. Sloane has not contacted me. Maddie came out in July with her husband and their 2 kids, and they stayed for a long weekend. And we rode in the morning and had dinner on the porch in the evenings, and it was the most uncomplicated time I've had with family in longer than I can remember. Earl's gloves are in the barn, on the hook by the door. They fit now. They fit for 6 years. I still put them on in the morning when the work is the kind that requires them, and they still smell like cracked leather and use, and every time I put them on I think about a man who handed them to me as a challenge and watched me become someone who could meet it. They'll fit when you've earned them. I earned them. The bolt on the gate is mine.